Welcome back to Learning with Merit. This is the first video in a line of tutorial videos covering the Python programming language. This is entitled ScriptKitty's First Python Program, and let's talk about what a ScriptKitty is to begin with. So as a new programmer, you might be referred to as a ScriptKitty, and this is sort of a joke to describe someone who does not know much about programming yet. Typically, ScriptKitties will use code they do not understand written by other programmers. So they'll go onto the internet, they'll copy and paste some code that they found and hope that it works. And this was what makes them ScriptKitties. They know just enough to be dangerous. Now we're going to talk about the Python programming language specifically. This is a great beginner language. It is interpreted, procedural, and object-oriented, and those things may not mean anything to you yet, but they will start to make more sense as you learn more about Python. And we're actually going to talk about a few of those things today. And then it's really important that we know that any Py file that we're dealing with, any Python file, will end in the .py extension. For example, if you look up here at tutorial, it's tutorial.py. Now, we're going to cover in this file. We're going to look at single and multi-line comments. We're going to look at our first program and some console output that we get out of that. What is the console? Where are we getting our output from? We're going to look at the first program with some user input. And then we're going to look at executing our Python programs whenever we are wanting to run them. All right, the first thing that I recommend learning in any programming language is how to make a comment. And this is because comments are how we write text or notes about our code. And whenever you're learning a new programming language and you're typing out some code, it's always good to make some notes about it so you know what's going on. So in Python, the way that we make comments, there are a couple of ways. First, we can use a hashtag. So if you see right here, I've used the hashtag symbol, and this is grayed out the text that I have here. This is a single line Python comment. Now, if I tried to go to the next line, it would not work. If I started typing some stuff right there, that's not going to work. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at how to make a multi-line comment. Multi-line comments are a little bit different. There's no built-in way to make a multi-line comment. Well, we can use something called a docstring. And this allows us to make multi-line comments. These are apostrophes or single quotes, and there are 3 of them, and then we put them on separate lines here, and that allows me to make a long multi-line comment. And then one little trick that you can use in something like VS Code or several code editors, but I know this is true in VS Code, you can use this control and / keyboard shortcut to make quick multi-line comments using all single quotes. So if I wanted to uncomment that, I could hit control / comment it back, and control / again. So hashtags for single, triple quotes for multi-line, and control / for quick multi-line comments if we need to comment things in and out quickly. All right, let's write our first program. We're going to get some output to what we call the console. So the first thing we're going to do here is, in order to build our first program, we're going to use something called the built-in print function call. All right, it's important that you know that this is a function call because later we're going to talk about how to make functions and what function calls are. But for now, we're just going to use some built-in functions, and we're going to call this print function that does a special job. It's going to print. Now, we use the keyword print here. It is the name of the function call, and then we're going to add some parentheses next to it. Now, we could just do this, but it's not going to show anything on the console that we can see. So we're going to add some quotes here in the middle. And then inside those quotes, we're going to add hello world. And the reason that we do this is that anything inside of that set of quotes there, it's called a string. And it's a string of characters. And those characters make text that we can put out on the screen. So we're going to type print hello world just like this out. Now, if we need to see it, what I'm going to do right here is we're going to open up a terminal. Now the way that you can do that is you can hit Control J on VS Code and it'll pop this right up for you, and you'll have a little terminal. And it should take you to wherever this particular file happens to be open. Then what we're going to do is to run this program. I'm going to type Python. I'm going to hit space, and I'm going to type the name. Whoops. Wrong thing. I'm going to type the name of my file. And you'll see that whenever I ran that file, it printed out hello world. Now that we know how to get some output to the screen, let's talk about how maybe we can take some input from another user. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to use another built-in called the input function call to accept input from the user. And the way that we do this is we use the input keyword, and then we are going to use parentheses after that. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't really allow us to do much. We don't really see anything on the screen. It just sort of looks like the computer waits on us. And then if you type something, it then does nothing with what you typed in. So the input function call by itself is not super useful, but it's very useful when you combine it with other things. So if we place a string inside of the input function, we can prompt the user. So here I have the input function call, and then I have placed a string of text in there, and this is going to ask the user to type in some input. So now we can see what we were supposed to type, right? It says type your input. We'll type some input here in a minute. But again, it still doesn't do anything with what we type in. So the last thing we're going to look at is if you place this input function call inside of a print function call, then we'll be able to see whatever the user types in as output back on the screen. Now, there are a lot of other things we can do with this input function, but we're going to look at how we use that when programs later. But for right now, we're really just going to take what they type in and spit it back out to them. And remember, we need to put our stuff in quotes. So here we are, we're going to type print. This is our print function call. Inside of that, we're going to type the input function call. This is called a nested function call here. So I've got one function inside of another. And then inside of the input, we're going to use our type your input. And this finally gives me an input that will work. So we're going to take a look at this. We're going to run python tutorial.py again because this is my file. And you'll see that it prints out hello world, but then it looks like it stops. Now it prints out hello world because earlier we wrote print hello world. But now it's asking me to type something. So I'm going to type A for the first one. And you'll see it didn't really do anything with A. It just left it there on the screen. Now it's asking me to type in some input. I'm going to type B here. And again, it didn't really do anything with it, but that time it prompted me. And the last time here, it should print out whatever I type in again. So if I say hi, you will see that it printed out hi here. So that's basically how we work with input. This allows us to take in input. This allows us to take in input and prompt. And then if we combine them, all three right here, we can take in input with a prompt and then print that output back to the screen. So congrats, if you've made it this far, then you've written your first Python program, and it's extremely simple, but you can do a couple of things. You can take some input, you can get some output, and that's extremely important to everything else you will do in programming, is how do we get input from other places, and how do we get output from our program whenever we're writing them. So now we need to talk about a couple of things that are specific to Python. So source code like this, like what we've written in this file, is compiled into something we call bytecode, which is basically just a little higher level than binary, right? And this is converted by the Python interpreter. So the interpreter is a program. So when we say Python is interpreted, what we mean is there's a program that reads this code here, which we call a high-level programming language, interprets the code that we've written, and converts it into bytecode. Now, on Windows on Windows, it is the python.exe. So every time you see me type Python, what I'm doing is I'm actually running this python.exe program, which is the interpreter to interpret whatever file I'm giving it as Python. Now, I could just give it a text file to do that. But typically we want to end our files in .py. Or you use Python 3 if you're using Linux or Mac OS. Now, then a Python virtual machine, which we call the PVM, or the Python virtual machine, of course, executes that bytecode one by one, literally line by line. So if we go through our code, right, it's going to convert all this, specifically the code parts where like I print and I input and I print input there. It's going to convert that into bytecode. And then it's going to line by line execute that code. And that's what the interpreter does. It's going to read it, turn it into bytecode, and then the Python virtual machine is going to execute that bytecode line by line as we go. So Python programs are executed by invoking that interpreter program, python.exe or Python 3, okay? through a command prompt or Python shell. So what you've seen me using down here, whenever I hit Control J like that, and I've opened up a terminal, this is the console or the command prompt or PowerShell, all kinds of different names for this stuff, but this is where I'm actually running it. And that Python right there is a reference to python.exe. So, there are a couple places that Python might be installed on Windows, for example. There are two likely places. One, it's either installed here under C program files, or if it's a specific user installation, it's going to look like this. Now, the XX here is to indicate the version number. The current version is Python 3.12, but you may have a different version of Python on your installation. But it's going to be in one of these two places, typically. And then what user profile represents here is whatever your username is. So if you follow this path using your username instead of user profile, you should be able to find your Python installation on your computer if you've installed Python. If we want to check the current version of the Python program or Python installation, we can do Python -- version. Oops, I'll do it right. Just like that. And you'll see that what I've got on here is Python 3.12. You could also do Python and then a large V. So we'll do -V like that. And it also gives me the version. So those are two different ways that you can do that. And of course, what I've got this on is Windows because a lot of people use Windows. Then, to execute those .py files, we use Python and then file name. So just like I did here with Python tutorial.py, that's how I execute my Python file. And it's important that I know how to do that because otherwise my code is useless. I got to be able to execute it. If we're on Linux or Mac OS, it's going to be installed here under USR bin Python 3. And again, it depends on the version that's installed, but for most of them, it's going to be under Python 3. And then we just change our version command just a little bit, Python 3 -- version. And then again, it's basically the same how we execute the files. We just use Python 3 in this case.